Something Stupid. Written by Mint Blue. Read by Arashi. Sayhara really didn't know what to expect when he said yes to Ouma's request for a date. At first, he thought the purple-haired boy was just lying again to get a reaction out of him. And he did react, like always, by turning a light shade of pink before hiding his face by looking down and staring at his shoes. But Ouma was insistent and would not let him go back to his dorm unless he got an answer. Sayhara had developed a small crush on Ouma throughout the past 3 years they had attended Hope Speak Academy, and Kaede had told him to confess on multiple occasions. But the boy was a coward. So, when Ouma graciously asked him out on a date, he, of course, said yes. He was far more excited than he let on, and after Ouma asked and got his answer, after what felt like hours of pestering Sayhara, he ran away, leaving Sayhara alone with his embarrassment and his newfound anxiousness. The first thing he did was run to Kaede's dorm. He thought about barging in, but he knew that she and Iruma had started going out not too long ago, and Iruma was very big on privacy, and he didn't want to know what the two of them were doing alone together. He knocked on the door, and Kaede was quick to respond, opening the door and speaking. "What's up, Shuichi?" She was alone, which made it much easier for him to talk. "Do you mind if I come in? If you're busy, I can come back another time." She nodded, allowing him in, and as she sat on her bed, motioned Sayhara to sit on her desk chair. Every room was designed similarly, and the students were allowed to decorate and rearrange furniture as long as no permanent damage was caused. This was nice, since every ultimate had a certain type of decor, and that rule allowed for almost anything, even painting if the student pays and does the job. Kaede's room was a light pink color, and posters of various musicians and composers covered her walls. It did suit her personality. "So, what did you need?" The two of them became friends during their first year and have stuck close ever since. So whenever Sayhara needed to talk about anything, she was always there to listen. She was the first person he came out to as bi, and was the first to know about his crush on Ouma, though it was brutally obvious to everyone but the pair. "Ouma asked me out on a date," he admitted, which meant it was real, and it was going to happen. Kaede shot up out of her bed, and her eyes sparkled with joy. It was almost as if they were filled with sparkles. Honestly, Sayhara thought she was more excited than he. "OMG! No way! What did you say? How did it happen? What?" Sayhara had to cut her off before she started repeating the same questions over and over again, like she does when she gets excited. "I said yes." Their conversation continued as Kaede fangirled over her ship, as Sumugi would say, finally sailed. He returned to his dorm later that night, after she told him how to dress and what to bring. The only problem was that Sayhara didn't know where or when the date was. The next morning, he woke up to a purple sticky note folded into a heart stuck under his door. It was Ouma's way of telling Sayhara where to meet him, though he was never direct and usually contained a riddle he would have to solve in order to meet the boy. There were only a few distinct locations where they would meet up, since Ouma liked being secretive, and with the help of his group Dice, who attended the reserve course thanks to Ouma, finding secret places to meet was easy. He read the note, a short, simple riddle that he had to decipher to get the meeting time, but there was no location. He read and reread, but to no avail. So instead of cracking his head so early in the morning, he decided to get dressed and ready for breakfast. Classes at Hope's Peak were similar to a normal school, except there weren't too many students, only about 48 in the whole school, since it was tailored to ultimates. They had to take core classes like math and science, but the rest of their schedule would consist of ways to utilize and better their talents. A school for the lucky and gifted. Sayhara never felt like he was as gifted as his fellow classmates, but the cases he took on with his uncle said otherwise. As he finished putting on his outfit, he thought about asking Ouma where they would meet, though he had a feeling it would be quite difficult to find him after the way he ran out of the library. He headed down to breakfast and saw everyone gathered at the table, other than Ouma. Of course, he would go into hiding. "There's my sidekick, the man of the hour!" Kaito was always too energetic to be awake at 7 in the morning. Since Aihara wasn't much of a morning person, getting up for school always felt like a hassle. He would snooze his alarm about 4 times before looking at the time and almost missing breakfast multiple times. Someone like Kaito was always amazing to him. He would sleep early and wake up earlier, doing morning runs with Maki, and always eat 3 balanced meals. Even though Ouma always made fun of him for being stupid, Kaito was an outstanding student who spent a fair amount of his free time studying. The man of the hour? Saihara was confused. Did Kaede tell them? "You know what I'm talking about, buddy." Over the past month, he had been working on an important case, and he recently made a huge discovery that may lead the police to identify the culprit. The only way the rest of the students would have known this was through the bulletin boards the school had up constantly sharing the achievements of their students. Saihara would always try to avoid anything from the police being leaked, but this was so big it made it on the local news. Unfortunately, Saihara didn't think that was what Kaito was talking about. He whispered, leaning into Kaito's ear so no one else could hear. "How did you know about my date?" Kaito froze. Saihara Shuichi, the ultimate detective, was terrible at human interaction and anything to do with conversation. But at that moment, he realized he had fucked up. "Date? My sidekick got a date?" And just like that, the whole class knew about his secret. He turned as bright as a tomato as he tried to shush Kaito from saying anything else to embarrass him. And, he thought to himself, maybe this is why Ouma didn't come to breakfast. It was too late to take back what he said, and because of Kaito's loud voice, he was sure they all heard him. "The ultimate virgins finally got pussy! Damn, Shuiki! Didn't know you were even capable of talking to women." Iruma was as enthusiastic as ever to pick on him. "Oh, please, Mew. Can't you see he's already been embarrassed enough?" Kaede, coming to his rescue as always, didn't really make him feel any better, and the outburst towards Mew made her shiver and hold herself together in her typical perverted manner. "Yes, Kaede." "Can't believe you got a girl without telling me, bro. So, who's the lucky lady?" Even though he and Kaito were friends, it was always a bit more difficult talking to him about personal things like sexuality. But he was already exposed to his class, so he decided to correct them. "Well, the lucky lady is actually a guy." And before the class could continue the conversation, the morning announcement had begun, telling the students to get to class. He was saved by the bell. Omokokichi had an issue with skipping class. He didn't really care about going, since he could score high grades, and be the second in their grade, first going to the detective himself. Seihara knew that well, but he still felt gloomy, not seeing Oma goofing around and messing with their teachers. The whole day he spent thinking about the purple-haired boy he'd fallen in love with. He never even noticed all he knew was the day when trying to beat him in a game of rock, paper, scissors. His laugh became sweeter and more endearing. His smile felt real after every tie, and the way his purple eyes stared right back into Saihara's made his heart skip a beat. Then, every time they interacted, his heart would race, and he would stutter more unless they were playing some other game Oma had made up. One day, about 2 months before his current situation, Oma and he had been hanging out and taking a stroll around the park near the school. The sun was perfect, and the clouds painted a beautiful scene. Oma was right in the center, perfect, and looking back at him with a smile. This smile, though, seemed much different than his typical grimace and Cheshire smile. It was genuine, filled with hope for the future. Saihara hoped for a future together, He didn't know what Ouma was thinking until he spoke. "Haven't you noticed it yet, Mr. Detective?" He questioned him, while tilting his head slightly to the side. Sayhara was confused then. Ouma continued. "I stole something very important to you, and you haven't even noticed it, huh? What a shame." He tisked, as Sayhara checked all his pockets, and nothing was missing. "I don't understand, Ouma. What did you steal?" Ouma sighed deeply, before looking directly into his eyes. "The most satisfying thing I have ever gotten my hands on. Your heart." Sayhara could have sworn the boy standing before him could hear his heart beating through his chest. And with that, Ouma laughed, and continued walking as if nothing had happened. Maybe Sayhara was delusional, but he could have sworn a pink shade lightly covering Ouma's cheeks. Of course, the boy would never admit to that, as he would never admit to anything which Sayhara enjoyed. The idea of figuring out Ouma and his web of lies was one of the many things that drew him in. Before he could continue his beautiful daydream, he heard the last bell of the day, and so he dashed out of class, mostly because he didn't want any of his classmates to ask about the morning's incident. His dorm door was wide open. All dorms would lock automatically when there was no one inside as a security measure. But when he arrived after running from the main building, he saw his room, covered in purple sticky notes. The doing was Ouma. "So, this is what you were doing all day instead of attending class. Huh, Ouma?" Sayhara reached for the sticky note on the floor in front of him. 1. Solve every riddle in order, and we will have a lovely afternoon together. Good luck, Shumai. It was currently 3 in the afternoon, and their meeting time was set for 6:30. He had 3 hours and 30 minutes to solve them and get dressed. Naturally, Ouma had to make this as difficult as possible, but for once, Sayhara had faith in his detective abilities. And so, as the clock struck 5:50, Sayhara had finally solved Ouma's last tricky riddle, their meeting place. Sayhara never thought Ouma would be the type to be sentimental, but maybe this was a new side of him the detective had uncovered. The first time Sayhara saw Ouma was at a small cafe near Hope's Peak. He had just moved all his belongings to the dorms and decided to look around the area. It was late in the afternoon when he stumbled into the cafe and sat down to have a cup of coffee. He didn't care about caffeine since he was an insomniac and wouldn't be able to sleep later that night anyway, and a small slice of cake. He sat peacefully, admiring the setting sun, when a loud, obnoxious group came in and started pestering the cashier. He was upset at first, but then realized she was laughing and enjoying the interaction. Slowly, the leader of the group turned, and his soft purple eyes stared deeply into Sayhara's, before disrupting the small peaceful moment to yell out, "Holy shit! The guy from the news!" He pranced towards Sayhara, mumbling to his group to stay back, before taking the empty seat across from him. "So, you're the super amazing detective himself, huh? What was your name again? Sayra? Sahara? It's Sayhara Shuichi, and I'm not really all that amazing," he quietly spoke, not daring to make eye contact with the boy in front of him. "Well, I think what you did was super cool, and that's a huge compliment coming from the ultimate supreme leader himself." He spoke loud and proud, confidence Sayhara never imagined he would have. Then he moved his hand to shield his mouth, leaned in, and whispered, "But, 'cause of that compliment, my organization with over 10,000 members will all be on you, so you better watch your back, Mr. Detective." Sayhara couldn't even comprehend what was going on. His world was spinning, and his lack of confidence was really starting to kick in. He had no idea what to say, and he had never heard of such a large underground organization. "Well then, Mr. Ultimate Detective Sayhara Shuichi, till we meet again under the roof of our new prison." And with that, the boy whistled to his friends and skipped out the door, The cafe was quiet again, and Sayhada's mind was racing. His first interaction with Ouma Kokichi. Scrambling together his belongings after changing into a nice button-up and dress pants, all thanks to the guidance of Kaede, Sayhada dashed out the door, checking his watch to make sure he would make it on time. He could not be late to his first. He could not be for Ouma. He got there at 6:29. The sun was setting, and the evening was warm. His heart was racing, and his face was bright red. Sayhada wasn't the type to run often. And through the windows, he saw Ouma, staring down at his phone, hair fixed into his typical curls, and a baby purple button-up that complemented his hair. He was everything. Sayhada walked in and took a seat across from him. Ouma looked up, and for a moment, Sayhada could have sworn he saw a light shade of pink cover his face. "You're late, my beloved," he quipped, taking his face off his hand and nodding his head in dissatisfaction. No, I'm not. The note said 6:30. Ouma rolled his eyes and spoke with a grin on his face. "I know. I lied. I just wanted to see if my Sayhada had confidence in his skills as a detective yet. And he's finally getting there. Thanks to me, of course." "It actually is thanks to you, Ouma. If I can decipher at least one of your lies during a conversation, then I think I'm improving." Ouma clearly wasn't expecting so much honesty, because for a slight moment, his mask dropped and his eyes widened. "Getting cocky on me now, huh? Well, aren't you curious as to why I have summoned you here today, Mr. Detective? Maybe a trap to finally catch you, or a kidnapping. I cannot believe you came unprotected," he gasped, covering his mouth. Ouma was nervous, and Sayhada thought it was cute. They both ordered food and drinks, and continued their normal banter, talking about class, their friends, and their future. Since they were in their final year of high school, the two boys had to start thinking ahead in life, and for their adulthood. It was nerve-wracking at first, but ultimates were always offered hundreds of job opportunities. What was difficult was deciding where exactly they wanted to go. Sayhada had decided to work with his uncle, since he was already interning there, and a college that had a criminology course was close by. But he had no idea what Ouma was going to do. From previous conversations, he had been offered plenty of jobs for his group to assist in, which he also had no idea what they were involved in, but from the stealth his group held, he could only imagine. The calm music made their evening wonderful. Sayhada was having a good time, and he could tell Ouma was too. And even though they went out often, it was never anything more than friends. Right now, Sayhada didn't know where they stood, or if Ouma even felt the same way he did. Maybe this was all a joke to him. Based on the effort he put into all those riddles, Sayhada knew it had to mean something to him. "Why did you ask me out, Ouma?" He didn't mean to say that out loud, but somewhere, deep inside, he knew he needed to find an answer. Ouma stared up from his slice of cake, and Sayhada could see the cogs working full force to come up with a lie to cover up his real intention. But then, he stared blankly, speaking with no emotion. 'Cause why not? That didn't answer his question, but Sayhada didn't want to ruin their peaceful dinner, so they continued chatting away. "You know, when we first met, it wasn't a coincidence." Ouma spoke, gulping down his third slice of cake. "I knew the other ultimates would have been moving in, and since I live in the area, I thought maybe, just maybe, I could meet the detective himself." He sighed and glanced up at Sayhada. He was finally being honest. "So, I used my evil deduction skills and thought this would be a place you would go. And, lo and behold, I see the most handsome man my eyes have ever laid their gaze upon, sitting silently drinking what I assumed to be coffee at almost 7 p.m. Honestly, the only ultimate I wanted to meet was you, Sayhada. I lied about not knowing your name, but I wanted you to say it." He pouted and looked outside at the now bright and prominent moon, before continuing. I was really sad that my beloved didn't know who I was, but I expected that too. And now look at us. You are just completely infatuated with—" Before Ouma could continue his ramble, Sayhara could no longer hold back his feelings. "I love you!" Sayhara was drowned by the blue aura of the moon and the sweet, strong scent of the cologne Ouma was wearing. He knew that this was the right time. Though he practiced over and over different phrases he could say instead of those words, they had all disappeared, and he was left with nothing but them. Sayhara thought he had ruined everything. He thought he did. He had said those 3 dreaded words, those 3 stupid words, and he meant each and every single one, down to the syllable, down to the letter. Ouma stared wide-eyed, attempting to process what Sayhara had done, what he had dared to say. And suddenly, it all melted away. The fear brewing in his chest was gone, and hearing that dreadful phrase didn't hurt, because the person who said them wasn't someone who would come and go. No, it was Ouma's one and only, the person he was born to meet. It was Sayhara Shuichi. Maybe Ouma wasn't the one who stole a heart tonight. That reward might be going to the detective himself. At that moment, Ouma didn't even notice the chuckle leave his mouth. And then, before he knew it, he was laughing. He was lost in the beauty of the world. His world, now becoming their world, united by the simple phrase, "I love you." Sayhara, for once, used his abilities and knew Ouma was happy. His laugh was contagious. And now, both boys sat at the table, unable to breathe, attempting to say something in between his gasp. Ouma spoke. "God, Shuichi, I love you so much." Their evening ended as they walked, bathed under the moonlight, back to the dorms, hand in hand, as the summer's humid weather caused them to shed a couple of layers and for their intertwined hands to sweat. But neither cared. They were both red, filled with joy, and both very much in love.